Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Klyovkov, and I'm the founding director of Healthy Mourning, an organization that is absolutely committed to finding ways to revolutionize the way we think about grief and mourning and really approach our grief in healthy ways. So today I wanted to talk about the dangers of avoiding our grief, because we do avoid our grief. We live in a society that is committed to avoiding our grief. It's because we're really afraid of our grief. And so let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about the importance of distracting and dosing. So distracting is when we move away from our grief. Dosing in the early days of our grief is about recognizing that we can't embrace it all. And so we find ways that look like distraction, but it's really dosing. It's really giving us the time and the space that we need to breathe as we're discovering the magnitude of our loss. If we continue to do that beyond the early times, if we continue to distract, and let's face it, society welcomes us to do that. Society invites us to distract. Society wants us to get busy. They want to distract us with music, with television, with going to the movies, with socializing with friends. We're being invited to distract by getting busy at work and returning to work prematurely, and really focusing in on work at a time when our brain just can't focus. Our brain just isn't there. We are experiencing very real physical symptoms of grief and mental symptoms of grief that is not allowing us to concentrate. And so those distractions aren't feeling comfortable. And it's because our grief is calling to us. And our grief is inviting us to slow down to its pace. Our grief is inviting us to not be afraid, but rather to be on the journey, because it's a sacred journey. And when we do get quiet and we start listening and trusting our grief, we become amazed at how gentle the journey can be. The dangers of not being willing to do that include the hardening of the symptoms that we've been experiencing. Have you experienced that the anger that you've been feeling is just kind of locking in, that you are becoming some kind of hardened version of yourself? The challenge is, if we're going to allow grief to really be our teachers, if we're going to allow the sacred journey, if we're going to be willing to convert our grief to mourning, then we have to be willing to bring our softness. And yet the hardening symptoms of grief, the hardening version of ourselves that we maybe don't even recognize, that's not the truth of who we are, right? And yet when we avoid our grief and we distract from our grief, we're just going to get more of the same. Right? We may even start developing some chronic symptoms because those physical symptoms of grief, if we're not willing to look at them and learn what they're there to teach us, then we might start really developing some chronic physical ailments, right? We miss out on our lives because we're so locked into the loss. And we say things like, I'm going to grieve for the rest of my life, like that's a badge of honor. What I invite you to is, instead of making that your badge of honor, let's make the grief journey a healing journey and recognize that we're not going to grieve for the rest of our lives. What we're going to do is we're going to find where our relationship is with our loved ones so that we can live the rest of our lives with them in it. Because here's the thing, if we're going to keep distracting away from the grief, then we're never going to be able to reclaim the memories. Those memories will be lost to us because it'll always be too painful for us to go there. And that's not what we want, and it's not what they would have wanted for us. We want to reclaim those memories. And yes, it's hard in the beginning. That's why sometimes we need a grief coach. That's why sometimes we need somebody that we can share the stories with and we can share our pain with, so that we can move through it. Grief was never meant to be a place that you get stuck in. Grief is meant to be a sacred journey that delivers you to that healing place, that delivers you to the next phase of your life. Healthy mourning is doable. There is another way to go through grief other than to just distract from it and avoid it. I invite you to join us in the Healthy Mourning movement. I invite you to come and visit us in healthymourning.com. And now we even have a new page on healthymourning.com, which is if you need immediate support. And I'm actually going to put the click to immediate support in the description here, so that if you are needing any kind of immediate support, if you need to set up a time of chatting with me for half an hour, if you need to take some kind of self-assessment questionnaire, which we have available to you, if you need to know how to join the Facebook group, all you need to do is click on immediate support and you'll find all of those avenues there for you. It is meant to be a time where you get to rediscover where the relationship with your loved one is now, but also discover what's meaningful for you, what brings you joy. Grief is a sacred, sacred journey that allows us to find a deeper truth and eventually invites us to live our best life. I invite you to be on this journey. There's nothing to be afraid of here, right? We need only be there for each other. Compassionate grief communities is what I'm all about, and it starts with the community of Healthy Mourning. Come and join us. We'd love to see you on the inside. Much love to you. Namaste.